Hello, I'm Pete Raby, and you are listening to the Leadership Learns podcast. Today, I'm joined by Amelia Sordell, founder of the wonderfully named Klowt, the personal branding agency. Amelia and their agency have worked with FTSE leadership teams such as the National Lottery on building personal brands to accelerate their business growth. Amelia, great to have you in with me today. Big welcome. I'd love to hear about what inspired you to start Klowt and how that's evolved over time.
Oh God, what inspired me to start Klowt? Well, first of all, thank you for having me. Quite an introduction. What inspired me to start Klowt? I wish I could sit here, and I say this all the time, I wish I could sit here and say I'm this marketing genius and I saw a gap in the market and I was like, I'm going to start a business in that. That's not what happened. I think like many people, the idea for the business grew organically off the back of my own knowledge and off the back of my own career. And so I started, to give context, I started building my personal brand, unbeknownst to me. That's what it was called at the time, when I was a recruiter. And so I worked with tech businesses, SaaS businesses, in helping scale their sales and marketing teams and their senior leadership teams in similar the roles within those kind of positions, and learned very quickly that whilst my colleagues were making 100 calls a day and getting very little ground from those 100 calls a day, I could share content and email content to CEOs of these businesses and get a much better response. And so, unbeknownst to me, that was personal branding. It was reputation building at scale. And then I managed to build a decent amount of money and did so well in doing that the company I was working for then invited me to be their marketing manager. And that's kind of where my personal branding journey kind of started, I guess, with intention. But it wasn't until COVID that I had already built up a decent following of people. I wouldn't say it was intentionally, it wasn't intentional around personal branding. I was just sharing my marketing insights and things that I was coming across as a marketing manager working in the business that I was working in. But often I would get messages from people saying, hi, I've been following you since you had 1,500 followers. Now you have 18,000. How did you do it? And so the lazy person in me was like, well, why am I going to respond to these individual DMs? I'll just start posting about my journey because clearly people wanted to know about this. And that was really the tipping point for me. And then COVID happened. And I sort of thought, well, if I'm getting asked all these questions by these people who want to know how I did it, there's clearly an appetite here for people to want to pay for this as a service. And I'd already kind of tested whether or not personal branding was a worthwhile endeavor in the company that I was working for at the time. I sort of monetized these personal branding workshops, sort of test whether or not the business model was worthwhile, which is a really good tip for people at the beginning of the early stage of their career. Test the business model before you launch a business. And then when COVID hit, I just thought, like many people, is this really my life? Like, am I really going to work for someone for the next 50 odd years? Or am I going to think, okay, let's take my own destiny into my own hands and have a crack and see if we can make this something. And so I quit my job Friday, left the business on the Friday, started the business on the Monday, had my first 2 clients by Thursday, oversubscribed 4 weeks in, haven't looked back since. So yeah.
Just before we get dug into a number of different areas there, has it been as you expected it to be?
No. Yes and no. Yes and no. I think it's been as enjoyable as I expected it to be, because you got to understand, I went into this thinking if I can just make enough money to pay my bills doing something I enjoy, then that was a win for me at that point. I was in a really unhappy marriage. I was in a really unhappy situation and I just wanted some joy in my life. So I thought, I can get paid to do something I love, then that's a win. So yes, it has been that. I'm getting paid to do something I love and I do love it. There are of course shit days, but I do love it. But on the other hand, for context, I had a business before this when I was 21 that failed and went bankrupt. So there were a lot of hesitancies I've had in the decisions I've made and the scale, the sort of scale in which I've grown as quickly as I have because of that failure. So in many respects, no, it hasn't been how I thought it was going to be, because my previous business was, I was a kid and didn't really know what I was doing. This one, I kind of know what I was doing, which in many ways makes it harder, easier, sure, but also harder. So no, it's been an interesting one for sure, but I wouldn't be able to do it without my team. I've been very lucky that I've hired some really awesome people and they're very invested in me and the growth. And, we were talking before we started recording, like, of where this business is going. They are so invested in that journey.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think ultimately something can only be as impactful if it's done with good people going off after something meaningful that everyone really cares about, right?
Yeah, we had a client just on that, Shahar, shout out Shahar. He's the founder of a business called Stoke Talent that they exited to Fiverr not too long ago. So he's not too bad, not done too badly. But he said to me, good businesses are founded by good people, but great businesses are built by great employees. So that really stuck with me. And I've really tried to take that really seriously, Peter, of like who I'm hiring and, do they match this vision? Are they a Klowt person?
Yeah. I mean, we could definitely have a long conversation about hiring and lessons and
Yeah,
bits and pieces on that.
sure.
The bit that was interesting that jumped out from that really good intro was that you'd got to 18,000 followers and people started to reach out being, oh, how have you done that journey? So one of the things that I reckon there's got to be, and I don't believe largely in this vastly different human beings of different generations. I think you get good and bad people from each generation that do things slightly differently is how I view it. And I'd imagine that personal branding for people that are probably under 30 is a lot more natural than people, sadly like myself, that have now touched that awful 40 landmark and bits and pieces, right? Where it was, when we were doing business early, it was about human relationships and it was about reaching out, phone calls, meetings, and you could build extremely successful businesses that way. Lots of people have done it before, lots of people still will. But the reality is, I've seen through my excellent marketing team and following more and more great people like yourself and like, well-known people like Gary Vee, is that, wow, this is a whole area that if you take it seriously, if you commit time and make good decisions in it, you can really have an excellent impact with it. I guess the question that naturally comes from that is, why do you think there aren't as many people in senior leadership positions? Why are people slow to get with the program when there's a lot of evidence out there that this could be really impactful for them?
I think to your first point about the kind of difference between these human relationships and like kind of personal branding online, I think that is the biggest problem with the whole concept of personal branding is people think that they're separate. To me, they're exactly the same. Like the way I spoke to the barista that served me my coffee this morning is the exact same way that I would speak to someone online, because it really matters to me what people, I don't care what people think of my opinions. I can give two shits about that, but I really, really care what people think about my character. I really, really care about what my reputation looks like to people, whether they come across me online or whether they come across me in a restaurant. Like there are very few people, touch wood, hopefully, that could say anything other than, yeah, she was a really polite, nice person when I met her, because that to me is way more important than the stuff I share online. Like the stuff I share online is great. I'm reaching networks of people that I otherwise wouldn't have access to, but it's my character that will make what I'm saying stick in their brain. It will make people want to do business with me. Yeah. So I don't want people to separate the two. Like people, the whole point of personal branding is people do business with people. That doesn't matter whether it's online or whether it's on a golf course or whether it's over a coffee or whatever. People want to buy from people. And I think that's the most important thing of all of this. But to your point about, this generational difference, I mean, look, it's been the same. In the 50s, executives back then were going, why should we have to do radio? Why should we have to do TV? Like there's always going to be some new innovative way of reaching people that senior executives will not understand, because let's be honest, they're not tactical anymore. They're strategic, but the strategy is still the same. Business strategies have very, very seldom changed over the last 100 years, right? It's like identify customer, find what customer needs, sell to customer, make customer buy, do it again. Like that's strategy that every single business follows. It's just the tactics that you use to get there have evolved and changed as we have evolved and changed, and as our behaviors have evolved and changed. So I don't necessarily think executives need to understand, like believe in personal branding, but I think they need to understand the value that it brings to their business as it pertains to revenue, brand awareness, etc. Just in the same way that they would understand a billboard or a speaking opportunity or I don't know, a TV advert would benefit their business as it pertains to brand awareness, etc. It's the same thing. It's just we're using a different tactic to achieve it.
So the biggest blockers from people getting started in a meaningful and impactful way are largely of not knowing how to go about it, right? Or like a fear, or like
there's normally four different ones. The first one will be they don't know what to say. The second one will be they don't know where to start. The third one will be there's a lack of confidence. And then the fourth one will be they have no strategy. Like what are we doing here? What is the point of all this? And so normally where we start with all of that is go, right, well, what's your goal? Like, what is the North Star here? Like before we started recording, we were talking about my North Star, which is, trying to empower people to take control of their lives. And personal branding is just kind of the vehicle that I use to deliver that message if you like, or help people be able to do that for themselves. So your North Star could be intrinsic like that, or it could be, I want to exit for 100 million in 3 years, or whatever it might be. But whatever your North Star is needs to be the center of what your personal branding strategy is. And personal branding strategy sounds like a really scary like thing, like, oh my God, I have to have a strategy. It's really not that deep. All you need to know is like what your goal is, who your audience is, and what you need to say to attract that audience to enable that goal. Like, it's very simple. You don't need to write it down. You just need to have it on a post-it note or the note section of your phone. It's not particularly difficult. But you need to start with your North Star. You can then work out what audience you need to attract, as I mentioned, in order to create that North Star. So for example, if I am someone listening to this and I am a CEO of a business, I've got equity in the business that I'm CEO of, which is quite often the case, or stock options or whatever it might be, and I know that we want to IPO in a few years, and my North Star is getting the biggest valuation humanly possible for that business, there's going to be a few people that I need to attract into my network as a personal branding activity in order to help that happen. So the first one is going to have to be customers, for sure. Like, you need to be seen as this, empathetic, listening leader, right? Like, people want to buy from businesses that are led by purposeful people. The second thing is you want to attract peers, because we've all seen massive IPOs from businesses who do not deserve those IPOs, all because the founder of the business was well known, right? Like, I can give you plenty of examples of that, Deliveroo being one of them. The third thing is you need to attract really good talent to make sure that IPO goes through, because if you're going to sell all these things, whatever it is you're selling, products, services, whatever, and you haven't got a team to deliver on that, that is going to impact your revenue, it's going to impact your profit, it's going to impact your valuation. So your audience, therefore, based on this example, should be your peers, should be talent, and should be customers. So if those three people are your audience, what do you need to talk about in order to attract those three people? Well, the obvious one is you need to talk about leadership, because your employees are going to want to know what type of leader you are, right? How do you treat your team? How do you view benefits? What's the strategy for the business? How do you, develop talent, et cetera, et cetera. The second thing that you want to talk about is the business, like from a profitability, scaling, acknowledging problems, talking about faults. That type of stuff will really attract your peers and will give you a better, for lack of a better word, clout in the market, because you will be seen by your peers as being a solid business person, right? Solid CEO. And then from a customer perspective, talk about your wins, talk about the things you're doing great, talk about what you're doing to make sure that your product or service is better than everyone else. And I'm not saying that from a perspective of, look how great we are, like this is an advert. Talk about it from a real human perspective. And the great example of that is, Airbnb. 2 or 3 years before they kind of really blew up, the founders would literally go and visit hosts. Like, they would fly around America, going and visiting hosts, being like, how can we make our platform better for you? And that story then got told through marketing. Obviously, the marketing team were genius, but told through marketing and PR, which then positioned the founders as these wonderful leaders because they cared so much about their customer. So that's the type of content that you can be talking about, which then will attract those three people, which would then increase your valuation, which will then increase, obviously, the options and the equity that you have in the business. So it like I said, doesn't need to be overly complicated. It just needs to have a bit of thought put behind it.
Yeah, and when you lay it out like that, Amelia, which is what all good things start off with, it sounds nice and straightforward, right?
It's very simple, which is why it's so hard. Simple things are hard.
So I think we're starting to get onto something that would be really easy to not talk about here. And that all sounds relatively straightforward. But as you say, people like you guys at Klowt exist to be able to assist people with that. So what, therefore, are the reasons that people don't go on what sounds like, if you follow those basic core principles, it should be a relatively inevitable march towards glory and greatness? But yet there are only handfuls of people that do it. Yeah. So why do people hit blockers? Why do people not get to 18,000 plus followers, etc.?
I think the main thing, if I'm honest, and loads of people won't admit this because of, like, look, let's be frank, the kind of people that we work with are, as you mentioned, the National Lottery, but we've also worked with like senior leadership team at FTSE, at the Skybet, Florida Group, A&M, like massive management consultancy companies. Like, these are people who are the top of their game as it pertains to business, right? And there are two issues with that. One, they don't want to be seen, because they don't want to think it's all about me, because there is this misconception about personal branding that it is, look at me, when actually the whole point of personal branding is, look what I can do for you. And I think when you reframe it for people like that, it goes from being this ego-driven activity to this strategic marketing imperative, which is what it is, right? You are using the reach that you as a founder or an executive have to reach people that your company brand simply cannot, because people do not trust company brands, right? So you need to stop seeing this as a look at me exercise and start seeing this as I'm a channel to reach people. And I think when you can be a bit more, should we say, pragmatic about it and remove the emotion from it, it then becomes a bit more of a logical conversation. And quite often when I'm having these conversations with these very impressive CEOs and I frame it like that, they're a bit like, oh yeah, okay. Like it's almost like a light bulb goes off and they're like, okay, I understand now why it's so important that I talk about that holiday I went on, or the fact that I give everyone 4 weeks off a year, or the fact, like, because for them talking about those topics is like a look how great I am. And it's like, you totally misunderstanding the point of this. It's not about you. It's about look what I can do for you, right? So that's the first thing. But then you have the people on the opposite spectrum who have the ego for this, who have, and ego is perhaps the wrong word, have the confidence for this, if you like, but they are so terrified of what people are going to say about them. And it is that whole concept of like, oh, what are the lads, screenshot my post and stick it in the WhatsApp group. Like that is the mentality that a lot of people have, right? And you're laughing because you know that is a reality for a lot of people, is that they worry about what other people think of them. And the internet is very permanent. It's a very permanent thing. The things that you say online can really impact your life and the life of other people around you. However, if you're a decent human being, if you're a good leader anyway, if you're a generally speaking, empathetic, nice woman bloke, like, what are you so afraid of? Do you know what I mean? I always say to my team, I'd be so much more pissed off that you said the wrong thing face to face to a client than if you said the wrong thing online. Because the wrong thing online, what does that mean? Genuinely, there is very few things that you can say online that are like enders, right? And I would, God forbid, I've hired anyone that would say something that's an ender, right? But you could say the wrong thing to a client, because clients, you know, are sometimes a little bit sketchy. And we say things to them and they take it the wrong way and whatever. So I'd be much more worried about that than if you said the wrong thing online. And I think if you're a nice person, you shouldn't be worried about what people are going to say about you. You could say nothing and they'll be pissed off that you said nothing. We have the insult of Switzerland, right? Stop being Switzerland. What? So I say nothing and then I'm also annoying? Come on. Doesn't matter.
Do you think there's a difference in this is way too sweeping, but personalities of nations, like you just alluded to there? Because ultimately, I've got a couple of really senior people, friends in very good clouty businesses, that when I meet up with them and have a beer with them, and I'll say, "God, you have to come on at some stage," they'll say, "Oh, no," because it is, as you say, "Well, I've got nothing that I should be talking about. Like, this is
stealth
the business
mode.
It's stealth mode. It's kind of like British reservation. That kind of like, oh no, not for me."
Yeah.
Whereas the reality is, as you say, I wonder if that's inherently a national thing, or does that just exist in any country? There's some people that are happy to put themselves out there, some people that don't.
I do think it's a bit of a cultural thing. It's funny because most of our clients are based in the UK, but we have a very large chunk in the States, and we're trying to expand to the Middle East at the minute. And the Middle Eastern culture and the American culture is very up for it. They're like, let's go. Like, we don't care. Look at me. Look how successful I am. Look what we're doing. And that's great because we bring what we like to call rebellious humility. Like, we want to be the rebels. We want to be saying the shit that no one has the balls to say. We want to be, you know, being the loud, proud, potentially sometimes obnoxious people, because that is what sells, right? That is what people buy. Okay. And it doesn't matter how you feel about it. I did a post the other day, which is so poignant to this conversation. I said, why on earth would you wear comfortable clothes, like a tracksuit, pair of tracksuit bottoms and a pair of trainers, whatever? Because it makes you feel comfortable knowing damn well that people will judge you for the way you dress. So regardless of how you feel about the situation, you might feel like, well, they shouldn't judge me because I'm really great anyway, but they're going to judge you. So why on earth would you not lean into that fact and dress up, like look good, make an effort? I love doing that now because it completely changes people's perception of me, because I'm coming from an agency. They're like, oh, she's going to turn up in a plaid, you know, shirt and a approach it. And I rock up in like sky high heels and a, you know, 3-piece suit. And everyone's like, oh, okay, this chick's serious. But it's the same kind of point, right? Like, why would you try and fight this thing of, oh, I don't want anyone to look at me, when you know damn well that by putting yourself out there, you're going to create so many more opportunities. That is more egotistical than the opposite, which is just putting yourself out there. I actually think putting yourself out there, you have to have less of an ego. You have to almost remove your emotion from it, because there are so many things that are more important than your ego in that situation. I'm not putting myself out there now because I want to be famous personal branding. I put myself out there because I want to generate inbound leads, because I want to hire the best people, because I want to have speaking opportunities that then will give me legacy career down the road when I don't want to have to post on social media. Maybe I'm going to pivot after I sell Klowt and turn into the anti-social media person. I don't know, but like I want to set myself up for that. My ego is completely removed from that, because if my ego was tied to that, I'd be like, oh God, what is everyone going to say about me? Oh my God, that person said that I'm a horrible person. Oh my God, that person thinks I'm a horrible leader. I don't fucking care. Like, because it's not about me. It's about what it can do for me. So,
Amelia, I think you're going to have a few people rewinding a few bits of this, because I think it's a really good, interesting new way of thinking about some of this stuff for sure. I'm there thinking, oh, that's interesting myself. Now, one of the things I'm really interested to hear also, I think I've said interested a few times in the last 2 minutes, is about what growth looks like and what people should be measuring good personal brand growth, because there are a handful of different things that you can use, followers being the absolute and likes or whatever. Have you pivoted at all in the way that with your clients or yourself personally, the way that you've gone about what good looks like? Because if someone's there listening going, I've only got 1,000 or 2,000 followers right now, what does that journey look like? Am I going to be at 100,000 followers in a year? What we talk like, the reality is, and we also spoke, before recording about how lots of people, it can take a long time to build up successful businesses, successful personal brands. I'd be interested to get your take on that.
It's interesting that you kind of rounded that off with like they only have 1,000 or 2,000 followers. Imagine if you had 1,000 or 2,000 people in a room in front of you.
Yeah.
Like I spoke to someone the other day, and we'd been working with them since August last year, and they were like, "Oh, how come I've only got 10,000 followers?" I was like, "That is literally a stadium. You have 10,000 people that care what you say." Like, just put that into context, right? You think about even 9. So I've got 140,000 on LinkedIn, thereabouts, right? That is basically 2 football stadiums of people that are coming to hear me speak every single day. That's insanity. Yeah. So to say only and have 1,000 after that word is nuts, right? Yeah. Like I would have died to have had 1,000 people care about what I think when I was like 25, 26, right? So just put it into context, okay? That's a lot of people. However, I really, really, really don't like measuring performance of personal brands on followers. And here's why. Because it's a lazy thing to measure. It's very, very easy to accumulate followers. I could say a bunch of stuff that Gary Vee says or Stephen Bartlett says and follow their playbook, and I would accumulate a decent number of followers, because that's a proven dopamine grabbing formula to make people like your content, right? If we look at Gary Vee, we've used him as an example a couple of times. For those of you that don't know who this chap is, he's a businessman from the States, and he was probably the godfather of personal branding, I would argue. Like, he really invented this whole concept of using the founder's brand to accelerate momentum for the business, right? He built the blueprint for it. But the way he goes about it is very different to how you need to go about it. His goal for that business and he is a business, by the way. He has a team of like 20 people. I know one of them or 2 of them, and they are a team of almost 20 that is just Team Gary Vee, right? Because he puts so much value on his personal brand. But his goal is different. He doesn't want to necessarily generate business. He doesn't want to necessarily hire great people. He doesn't want to say, he has a legacy plan of what his North Star is. So followers matter to him, because he's building up products to sell to the everyman, right? Like we think about VCon and, all the NFT stuff that he's doing. He's selling products to the everyman. I'm not selling products to the everyman. I'm selling £50,000 a year retainers to FTSE 100 business, C-suite, right? So I don't care if I have 100,000 followers or I have 1 million followers. I care that the people that are following me are right for the type of audience that I'm trying to attract to make those sales happen. So I think it's really important that instead of looking at the number of people, which while is an easy measure, you look at who is in that number. And a really good example of this is we work with a client who's in recruitment, and they're going, why should we work with you? I'm getting 500 likes a post. And I said, well, who's liking your posts? He's like, what do you mean?
All my junior mates.
Oh, no. Other recruitment owners. And I said, are you selling to them? And he goes, no. And I go, well, it's fucking shit then, isn't it? And he was like, oh, yeah, I see your point. It doesn't matter that you get 500 likes. It matters that those likes that you're getting are from the people that you need to attract in order to make your North Star goal happen, which is why we will start with the North Star goal. So no, Likes don't matter, followers don't matter. It's who is following you and who is liking your content that matters. And it's probably worth noting as well that the most powerful things that you can share will get no engagement from the people who actually are the most engaged in it. Because there is a fear of visibility piece here, particularly with platforms like LinkedIn. People don't like engaging with other people's content, but they will look at it. One of my best performing posts in terms of revenue, like the inbound leads I got, was one that I did about my divorce. And I said that, people, which is, we can get into a whole different discussion about the power of being personal, right? As it pertains to your business. I said a minute ago, people buy from people, like, share some of the stuff that you're going through, because that's what resonates with other people. But I posted this thing saying, look, I'm going through divorce. And the thing that people always say to me is, oh, I'm so sorry. And I'm like, I'm not sorry. I'm loving life. Like, this is one of the best decisions I've ever made. And I got, I think, a couple of thousand reactions on it, which is great. But I had nearly, I think it was 20 million views, which if you know the kind of algorithm on LinkedIn particularly, you know that a couple of thousand reactions should not equate to that many views, which tells me that loads of people were looking at it, but very few people engaged with it. But I got a lot of messages off the back of it from, arguably a lot of male CEOs and founders who've been through a very similar experience, because they themselves have also, like, I don't want to make this about gender, but largely speaking, most business owners in the UK are men, and a lot of business owners get divorced because, your marriage, if you get married before you start a business, it doesn't stand the test of time unless you have an incredible relationship with that person. The stress that you go through as a business owner causes a lot of impact on your family life, and it really does. So they really understood where I was coming from with that post, and therefore we then did business with them. But that had nothing to do with personal branding. And if I was just measuring likes, the performance of that would have been terrible.
Yeah.
But actually, when I look at the ROI of what we gained from that post, it was, I'm talking like 100, 200,000 pounds.
Let's talk about the questioning of like platforms, because the reality is, I'm not sure where I read it, but it was effectively saying, there's going to be different platforms. There's 20 different platforms, but actually the one that, as you say, to use that North Star, analogy, you've got to be spending your time investment on the platform.
You're on the one that's right for you.
That makes the most sense in relation to your North Star. Let's use LinkedIn, recruitment, and everything else is very much that way. But what's your opinion when it comes to, is it just about one platform? Should it be multi-platform approach? Because again, it does come back a little bit, like I alluded to. Although people, I think more and more people totally get and buy into the value and what it can do, etc. But it always comes back to that thing that everyone shares, is time.
Yeah.
How much time do you spend? Can you spend on doing stuff?
It's the number one question we get as well from clients when we do pitches. They're
How
like, how much time is this going to take?
Yeah, exactly. And is it an hour a week? Is it an hour a day?
Yeah.
I want to come and talk about and ask your opinion in relation to the consistency of posting and content creation, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, multi-platforms, where do you stand with that?
Look, I think it boils down to this. You wouldn't try and go and visit every single party that was happening on one day and hope that you'd meet a few people, right? You would go to the one party that has the best group of people, has the most high quality group of people, and spend all the hours that you have in the day at that party. And that is how you kind of have to think about the social media strategy. You have to think about, where is my audience? Like, we've used the previous example of someone that, is trying to exit with their stock options or equity in a business, and they're a CEO when trying to get 100 million, whatever. That is the person that I framed earlier. If you're that person and you're trying to attract the audience that we identified there, which was your peers, talent to work for the business and customers, it makes the most sense if you're a B2B business to be on LinkedIn, because that is the party that everyone is at, right?
Yeah.
But if you're a, I don't know, say D2C fashion brand founder, it might make more sense for you to be on TikTok and Instagram, because that is what your audience is. So you just need to have a little, it's not even like it's something that you need to spend a huge amount of time on. Like, it's just being a bit aware of, like, where are the people that you're trying to attract spending their time. And it might not be on social media at all. They might be on Reddit. They might be on, Medium, for example. You might need to be publishing articles on Medium. Social media is not the be all and end all of personal branding. It's just a very small part of it. Going back to what I was saying earlier, we need to remove this idea that a personal brand lives exclusively on social media. You have a personal brand now. You have I have a personal brand with you before I walked in this room. You had one with me. Alfie had one with me when he met me at the door. Everyone has a personal brand. It's just a fancy marketing term for reputation. But how you strategize that and how you shape that is then depends on how it then turns out. So just work out where the people that you're trying to attract, the people that you want to influence, for lack of a better word, and go for that. And I know what the follow-up question is going to be. Should you do multiple channels? My advice is focus on one. Like,
Okay, good.
we've only got, a certain number of hours in the day. Like, I'm running a business, you're running a business. Like, I haven't got time to be doing a million things. So when I first started, even though I'm running a content agency, I only did LinkedIn. And now I've got the cadence with that, and it kind of grows by itself, and we get inbound leads consistently from that without putting too much of an effort in. I then went onto TikTok, and then went onto Instagram, and now like looking at Twitter. I'm now looking at YouTube. I'm now looking at writing Medium articles. I'm writing, doing news. Like, I've layered it up now because I can. And a big part of that being because I can is because I have so much content I created on LinkedIn. I can just repurpose, redistribute, recycle, remix. There's no longer this creation aspect because I've already done it. Like, I know what the formula is. It's just about tailoring it to the next platform that I need to be on.
Yeah, nice. What about consistency of
Yeah.
content sharing, variety of content sharing? There's, since we started the podcast ourselves, definitely see that certain things seems to get a certain type of engagement from certain people
Yeah.
versus not, and everything else. But yeah, consistency and regularity. Like, for people starting out going I've done it in fits and starts, but I've never really had a consistent approach to how I'm going to develop this personal brand. What yeah.
I think the first thing to kind of identify is frequency and consistency is not the same thing. Like, I don't need you to show up every single day to have an impact with your personal brand. When I first started posting, I only posted 2 or 3 times a week, which in context of what I do now was like crazy. And even now, I don't even post 7 days a week sometimes. And I think it would be very easy for me. And I did used to be one of these people where I was like, you have to post every day if you want to make an impact. You actually don't. You just have to be consistent, just like you would be consistent in the gym. You say you want to go to the gym for let's say 3 times a week. That is what most people are going to aim for, is 3 times a week in the gym. Seems manageable, right? There are going to be some days that you can't hit that because you have a friend's birthday, you have a kid's thing, you have a this, that, and the other. So the next week you might go 4 times because you need to keep that consistency, right?
Yeah.
That's the same thing with posting on any platform. You just need to be consistent. If you're going to say, I'm going to show up, I'm going to show up 3 times a week, show up 3 times a week. If you can't do 3 times a week, then do 4 the next week, or do 2 the following week, or whatever it might be. But just having that cadence and that habit of showing up is what will build your personal brand. Content is such a small part of this. Like, the stuff that I'm saying and the stuff that I post is not revolutionary. Like, I'm not moving mountains with the things that I'm saying. I'd like to think a lot of people will think the same way that I think. And I know because I get DMs from the people that don't want to engage with my content, but they do want to message me saying that I agree. So there are people that agree with me, but I've been so consistent in my message that I now cut through the noise. Like, I've been saying the same thing for 4 years. I'm not saying anything different to a lot of other people. I'm just been doing it longer. I've been more consistent. And most people do it for a year and give up, or 6 months and give up, or 3 weeks and give up. How many people sign up for the gym in January and by March are like, Meh. It's the same thing. So just be consistent. And if you're aiming for an actual KPI of this, just post 2 to 3 times a week on LinkedIn, if that's your platform. TikTok, probably a little bit more. Instagram, about the same. And just build up a cadence with it.
Once a week ain't going to get the job done.
No, but I mean, once a week in the gym's not going to get the job done either, is it? So, it's about looking at it as a kind of practical part of your life.
Let's talk about being out the comfort zone, Amelia, right? Because I think one of the things that would hold some back, it would have held me back for sure. Feeling, we had a great guest on a couple of weeks ago talking all about imposter syndrome. And the reality is, for a lot of business leaders out there, it will not be a natural thing to all of a sudden go from being not having done this. So, oh, cool. Yeah, I just put my thoughts out there and I'll share a video on this and bits and pieces. Have you seen much success with actually getting people that aren't confident to begin this? Know it's important, want to get it going, but aren't confident in it. How they go about even beginning to share the stuff that you were talking about here?
It's interesting because almost every single client that we've ever worked with has been nervous at the beginning. I was nervous in the beginning. Like, I think people look at my sort of laissez-faire attitude now and be like, oh, she's always been the comment. I have not. Like, I can assure you. I'm a very different person today than I was even 2 years ago, even 1 year ago, right? I used to still get anxiety after I posted, even a year ago. But I do think, imposter syndrome or self-doubt or lack of confidence, however you want to frame it, it's all the same thing in my head. It makes you human, right? It also means that your body is sending you a signal to do something. Like, we really underestimate the power of that nervousness that we get. I think a lot of people feel nervous because they think that that's their body going, you shouldn't do this, when actually your body doesn't know the difference between excitement and nerves. You have the same feeling, it's just the way that your brain interprets it. So if you're thinking about, right, posting content, oh my God, that's going to make me feel nervous and it's all very new and I'm not really sure how it's going to be received. Instead of thinking about like the worst that could happen, think about what is the worst that could happen. Like, what is the upside of this? The upside is credibility, it's community, it's network, it's opportunity, it's brand awareness, it's being positioned as the expert in the space, it's being positioned as the option, not an option in the space, right? What is the downside? What, you get no likes? You don't accumulate followers quickly? Like, the upside to me is so much greater than any downside that you could possibly have, right?
Yeah.
What's the worst that could happen? And I think that attitude is something that, going back to my North Star, that is something I really want to encourage people to embrace. It's like, what is the worst that can happen? Like, I know this is a really bold statement, but you can come back from a missed mortgage payment. You can recover from a bankrupt business. You can recover from a failed marriage. Trust me, I've been in both of those situations and I am fine right now. So if these are all the worst case scenario, of course, there are worse things that can happen, but they don't happen as frequently. If that's the worst thing that could happen, what are you waiting for? You're just creating this narrative in your head that it's going to be catastrophe and everything's going to go wrong. No, that's probably not what's going to happen. But what will happen if you sit on that too long is someone else is going to take that opportunity, and then it's going to take longer for you to catch up. And trust me, there are a lot of people who are posting content right now. And I know we keep talking about LinkedIn, but I feel like it's probably most relevant to your audience. But the LinkedIn feed has seen a 22% increase in engagement over the last 12 months, which means that there is a huge uptick in people looking at content in that feed. Also means there's a huge uptick in people creating content for that feed. So if you're someone who's allowing their ego, ironically, to stop them from taking those opportunities, someone else will take them.
The train's already moving.
The train's already gone.
Yeah, awesome. I can feel people grabbing for a pen or something keyboardy and starting to plan out what this is going to look like for them, Amelia. So I think it's been a great conversation so far. Next thing I want to cover briefly is variety, in terms of, I've got to be honest, as you said yourself, like the first few times doing a selfie video, feels disgustingly unpleasant.
I hate to say it doesn't get any easier.
What have I become?
Yeah,
so what
don't
is
look at
me.
Me.
Yeah, exactly, right.
Disgusting.
So, but again, I think Gary Vee's been pretty great. Steve Bartlett created some great stuff on that as well. But how important is variety to what you're putting out there on a platform? Like, do you think it's absolutely vital that you're covering 4 or 5 different things? Do you think just doing one is enough if you're extremely good at it? Like, how do you take that?
Look, I think it depends on the person. Like, I love video because I'm lazy and I can't bother to write stuff. And I also think that I come across better on video. I think and this is actually something that's an interesting concept for me, because I've always said that copywriting was my skill set. And I'm good at, don't get me wrong, I know I'm good at copywriting. But when I look at my content sometimes, I'm like, oh, that sounds aggressive. And that's because the way I write is very much how I speak. And I'm very inflection. Like, I'm very that's how I speak, which when it's written, it lacks the body language, it lacks the nuances of how I communicate like this. And so that sort of realization led me down this garden path of like, okay, well, I need to stop doing as much copy and doing more video, because I don't want to be this kind of aggressive, in many ways. Like, sometimes I read my content and I'm like, wow, that sounds really angry, but I'm not angry. Like, the way I communicate, it sounds like it reads angry, but the way I wrote it was not angry. So I really lent into, right, video is my thing then, because then people can't misconstrue what I'm saying. It's very obvious how I'm, whether I'm being sarcastic or whether I'm like being playful or whatever, because it's not in a text format. There is context to that. So to your point, do you need variety? Depends on whether you could have time to create variety, right? Like, I'd like doing video because all I need to do is ask Sam, my amazing, senior video producer, to whack a camera in my face, ask me a few questions, and bosh, I've got 2 weeks worth of content. But not everyone has that luxury, right? So if sharing written copy is easy for you, then do that. If sharing an image is easier for you, do that. If shoving a camera in your face is easy, do that. If something like this is a great setup for you, could you grab a colleague or grab a friend and interview each other and then chop up the video content? Do that. But I think it's more about, let's not add extra things for you to do. Like, let's just do the thing first.
The thing that's awesome with that, though, as well, is that for years and years, especially the school system, whatever, you're constantly trying to work on the things that you're not good at. Whereas what that does is that if you stop and go, what do people resonate with me as an individual the most on?
Mm.
Do they like my energy? Okay, cool. Well, there's one or two areas that are much better for content to display energy rather than the aggressive written
Yeah,
word,
yeah,
as you
yeah.
say. So you kind of,
Yeah.
it's a nice start to kind of take it from a positive and go, what am I naturally good at? What do people seem to like in me? Well, therefore that
Yeah.
can be how I go about
And
sharing
if
it.
you're a senior leader, like, sorry to interrupt you, but it's such a good point. Like, if you're a senior leader of a business, chances are you are charismatic to a degree. Otherwise, you would not be in that position. Like, there is a certain skill stack that you need to be a senior executive, right? So, if you've got this charismatic people person type personality, and that is why people like you, why wouldn't you lean into that? Like, that was the
Mm,
big light bulb moment for me. I was like, why, going back to the analogy I was saying about, dressing up to make a good impression. Why am I fighting,
mm,
just because I want to do text posts? Like, no, like lean into who I am. I'm love smiling at people. Like, I'm generally quite a jolly person, but that was not coming across because, again, no body language, no energy. Video, I can give you all the energy and the message lands, but it lands in a completely different way.
love it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Biggest mistakes you witness? I think one of the, we've covered a couple of them. I think one of the thing that will resonate with a lot will be like, yeah, do it for a week or two or three,
Yeah.
do it for 6 months or a year. Are there any other biggest mistakes other than the fact that you've just got to keep going with it? Because as you say, and that'll be another great thing that's been water poured over on this episode, if it's not just about the followers numbers that you're getting, if your audience is whatever it may be, and it's about the quality of what you've got going there, the reality is it could be easy to lose heart if you don't see your
Mm.
run or your likes or your followers growing in a certain way. Other big mistakes, Amelia, that you kind of see that.
Look, I think the big mistake is giving up for sure. Like, I mean, that's with life, right? Like, everyone does that. They start the diet, then they eat something wrong on the Wednesday, and they go, screw it, I've messed up the whole week, so I'm gonna just like we all have this inherent desire to give up. I guess it's like some weird evolutionary fault that we all have of
Mm,
like just giving up. So I think that's the first thing, is like consistency really matters. It's not sexy, it's not going to get likes, it's not attractive, but that is what works. It's just doing it for a long time.
yep.
The second thing is being vanilla. Like, and what I mean by that is not having an opinion. Like, people have this, and I'm one of these people, right? I'm very introspective, and I really do consider everyone's thought process, or at least I try to, where possible, everyone's thought process in things I say and decisions I make and all that kind of stuff. And I think that comes par and par with running a business, right? That you have so many people you have to consider in your decision making. You need to be objective and have perspective of how it's going to impact other people. I don't position my content like that,
Mm,
because if I did that, then there gives no reason for people to engage with it, right?
safe.
Yeah, it's so safe. Like, imagine if I was like, what do you think of this? Well, actually, like, I think that if you were in this position, you would think this. Like,
You
no
could do
one's
that, or you could do this.
yeah,
Yeah.
no one has a reason to have a conversation with you, right? So
Mm,
I think you need to have, if you've got to say something, say it with chest and be prepared to back up what you're saying, but also be prepared for other people to give them your perspective. And then you can go, thank you so much for adding that. That's really interesting to add to conversation.
yeah.
Do not think that you need to consider every Tom, Dick, and Harry's perspective on the thing that you have an opinion about,
Yeah. Yeah.
because the point of posting content is not about you being right. It's about starting a discussion about the thing that you want to talk about, which goes back to my ego piece of, I don't care whether you think I'm right or wrong. I just want to talk about it. Like, that's the whole point, right?
Nice.
I think another a thing that people do, like a fatal flaw, if you like, is they rely too heavily on things like ChatGPT or industry news, or just being very like agnostic in their approach to it. Like, it's very similar to what I just said about not being vanilla, but I can scroll through LinkedIn right now and I would put 50 quid bets happily on things that were written by ChatGPT, because I can tell that there's no personality in that. I can tell that tone of voice is just no inflection, no thought, no, there's
Mm,
not a human being behind that opinion. That is just something that's been typed in somewhere with a decent prompt, pulled out, copied and pasted and posted. And I think we're going to see that more, which is that everyone's going, oh, that's a bit of a threat to your business, isn't it? I was like, no, it's bloody great, because that means everyone is going to be posting absolute nonsense
yeah.
for the next 2 years, because they're going to see ChatGPT and products like that, or platforms like that, as this quick win, easy solution to getting content out, when actually not realizing that every single other person has had the same thought process. Also not really realizing that AI is only as good as the prompts that you ask it, but also it doesn't have your personality. And that's the whole point of personal branding. ChatGPT cannot tell your stories. They cannot show your experience. Your face, your your goal, your story, your career is so much more powerful than any bloody insights that you could give anyone that you can find on Google. And that is why people don't Google stuff. They want to come to you to find it out, because if it was information they wanted, they could find that out in a search engine.
Yeah.
They don't want information. They want to know it from you. That's why Kardashians exist, right?
Yep.
Like they're billionaires off the back of sitting around a dining room table eating salads, because people care about other people's lives. They don't care about anything else. The people like people.
Yeah, data by itself is utterly uninteresting. People are interesting.
Yeah.
The flaws, their
Story
positives,
sell. Was it
stories,
facts tell, story sell?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, love that. Are there any other notable trends? I mean, we just talked about ChatGPT as one, as you say, the great threat. And I might regret this statement horribly, as you say, it's about being bold. And for our industry, there's going to be a lot of automation that's going to come in. Absolutely, that at certain parts of the market will be, but you know the sector as well. How many times does a great CV land a really disappointing individual across the table from you because their attitude, their values don't align with your own, right? Compared to someone who you're like, this is a bit of a rough looking thing, but wow, you've got a background and a story that is interesting that I totally believe I'm going to work my damnedest with you to be able to get. So I'm not sure that all of the automation stuff is as much of a threat as it is.
That's such a good point, actually. Like going back to my recruitment days about like looking at CVs, like anyone can Google the best CV template.
Yeah.
And create, like, it doesn't take a genius to be able to take a template and then, fill in blanks if you like. But I was literally looking at a CV yesterday for someone else's business, and I looked at the CV and I was like, it was for a sales guy, and I was like, CV's a bit shit, isn't it? And he was like, yeah, but he's bloody good. I was like, oh, okay, so what did he do last year? And we were talking about it, and I was like, why is that none of that on this guy's CV? And none of this guy's story was on his CV. And I think that is such a good point about where AI and automation is going is, yeah, fine, automate stuff, great, it's going to save me money. But is that going to put me in a differentiating position?
Exactly.
No, it's not, because everyone else can do that. There is no AI tool that I can access that you can't.
It's working out for your business what should be automated, could be automated, and what's the stuff where the human has to be the front and center piece of it. I think that's the difference, right?
Anything customer facing has to be human.
Yeah.
I hate businesses that have bots, no phone. Like, you need to have a human being dealing with other human beings. Automate the other stuff, no worries, that's fine. The stuff that they don't need to know about, automate it, no worries. My team do a lot of research using ChatGPT. We don't use it to write content because, again, what we do is human.
Yep.
We can't.
But it can be thought provoking.
Yes, exactly. So we'll use it to do research. We'll use it to help expand ideas. We'll use it to inform questions that we should be asking clients, which is a great way to use it. Prompts, if you like. But we don't use it to create content because that is not a person. It's a bot. Doesn't matter what you teach it, it will always be a bot. This is not robotic branding. This is personal branding. And no bot's going to be able to tell your story and build that rapport with someone.
Amelia, awesome conversation. Really, really enjoyed it. And knew that I would from having seen a bit of your content before. Aside from following yourself and following Klowt, is there your number one recommendation when it comes to podcast, book, movie that I've mentioned the Air movie to you before, the stuff that you've been talking about? I know you're going to love that film, especially because it's got the best soundtrack out of the 80s that you've ever heard. Ben Affleck's doing his thing as Phil Knight, the creator of Nike, and it's Matt Damon at his very finest. But is there any of those kind of things that got you started? Is a bit of a Bible for you that you always return to, movie or book or podcast related?
God, that's such a good question. There are so many books that I love. I think Atomic Habits is a great one. Some rogue recommendations that I think no one really knows about. How to Argue with a Cat changed my life by Tim Hendricks. The whole concept of the book is about how cats negotiate with you by using honey, basically, and humans argue by using a whip. And we have a lot to learn by a cat, because a cat will influence you to giving it a treat by coming and sitting on your lap and being like all lovely and sweet, whereas a human will argue to win the argument, which then doesn't actually win anything. So that was a very, really, really good book, and I recommend that to anyone.
Nice.
Other books, I'm a big book reader, so I read probably a book a week almost. But that would definitely be one of the standout ones.
Nice.
Gosh, there's so many. I'm trying to think of ones that I've read recently. If you're in sales or you're running a business, Predictable Revenue by Aaron Ross is really good. A lot of the concepts that I talk about in personal branding, he talks about in sales. So it's like this human relationship, automating what you need to automate. going what he calls cold calling 2.0 is basically inbound, which is how my business is built. The Sales Acceleration Formula, which is by the guy that founded HubSpot, is also a great book. There's so many. Like I'm such a book person. Like I love Mental Toughness, also a great book. Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck.
Yeah, that's
does what it says on the tin.
Yeah.
That it really does say what it does on the tin.
Yeah.
There's so many. I'm such a big believer, and if I give anyone advice, period, about personal branding, about business, about life, about whatever, you can literally get someone's entire life skills and experience for $15. Like, read a fucking book. Like, it's such a dying art. A lot of my team members, I'll buy them books and they'll be like, oh, I don't read. I'm like, learn.
Yeah.
Like I will not accept that as an excuse. Like, oh, but I don't learn that way. We'll learn to learn that way, because a lot of the stuff that you will get from reading a book, you will not get from a YouTube video. You will not get from a podcast.
Absolutely. Yeah. I started biking to work after lockdown, and I love reading an actual book, not electronic book, an actual book, but having that 35 minutes each way, being able to listen to an audio book means that the stuff I can consume is so much more than it would be otherwise. As you say, if you're not a reader, then get stuck into audiobook. Just find a way to get new ideas. Absolutely, yeah.
And I think the thing is, we all forget that our entire civilization is built on books. Like, we exist today, we communicate today, we do the things we do today because someone wrote it down somewhere and we then pass that on. So like, even little things like handwritten notes, I'm such a big believer in that kind of stuff. I'm like, let's keep these traditions because they do matter.
When we were in the Sunday Times Fast Track a few years ago.
Amazing.
And Sir Richard Branson on stage, when we went for the dinner, went and talked about how everyone in the room should be writing a book, because he says it's one of the great self-reflective journeys that you can go on, where you forget of how much stuff even Klowt being new, it's like there's so much that you've learned during that time. We've been going since 2008. It's like you've learned an incredible amount during that time, and I really believe in the chapters that exist within the business. It's like, any plans, Amelia? Is that on the to-do list, or is that going to be something that gets done?
No, actually, we're in the middle of writing one at the minute. Nice. The plan is that it's January next year, but we'll see. Like, as a strategic marketing person, the best time to launch a book is in January, because then you have the whole year to sell it. Most people buy books from the year they were published. So if anyone wants to publish a book, publish it in January. But just on that point, like, if you can't write a book, which a lot of people can't, and if you can't then get a ghostwriter to help you, do a vlog. Like, it brings me so much joy looking back at my Klowt vlogs, which we now do for clients. Like, we sell these vlog packages to clients where we go in and create weekly vlogs, and it's really cool. But just that reflectiveness of like looking back at like episode 1, episode 2, episode 3, and how ropey it was, and how scrappy it was, and the crazy office that we were in, how small it was, to like now it's even that like 40 episode journey or 50 episode journey. It's like, oh my gosh. Like, we've come a long way.
Yeah.
So if you can't write a book, vlog. Like, just vlog your thoughts every day, even if you don't post it anywhere. It's like, it's a cool thing. It's like a journal, right? You look back and you're like, oh wow, I forgot that happened.
Nice.
Yeah.
I think you might have just covered it with the final question, that was, if there's anything that you'd want our listeners to take away, what would it be? It sounds like it would be read.
Yes, but definitely read.
Is that it?
No, that's not the only thing. I mean, there's so many things, but I think just to be curious, right? Like, I think people look at, perhaps, and maybe this is me being just a bit self-deprecating, but I think people look at someone like myself and think it's kind of all fluff and no substance because of the fact of the industry that I'm in. First of all, like, I'm in a branding capacity. I make people quote unquote famous for a living, right? But I would love people to leave this podcast thinking a little bit more about, actually, it's not about that. It's about a much more deeper meaning, which is, how can I leverage who I am as a person to better my opportunities, to better my team's opportunities, to grow my business, whatever that goal is. It could be that, you want to help your community, you want to give back in some way, you want to help your mum buy a house, whatever it might be. But I really do think people really underestimate, because of the negative connotations around influencers, which we definitely are not. The people that create influencers is not what we do at all. We create thought leaders. But how could that influence that you create, online, offline, whatever it might be, lead to better opportunities? And that is what I want people to really think about personal branding. Is like, not that it's this big shiny object. It's like, how can I leverage my personality to gain an advantage in life? So, yeah,
Awesome.
and also read.
Yeah, always useful. Amelia, thank you so much for coming in and sharing your journey and your leadership learns with us today. I know that there'll be loads that will resonate with listeners, and like me, they'll be taking away some valuable ideas. Thank you, everyone, for listening. If you enjoyed the episode, please give a 5-star rating and share with others in your network. Amelia, thanks so much for coming in.
Thanks for having me.